Hi everyone, this is Coral, otherwise known as Luna's mom. This month we're doing Brain Tumor Awareness Month, so we are showcasing brain tumor warrior parents and caregivers, and today I have Jaycee's parents here.
My name is Curtis.
I'm Trish.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for, being open to come on here and trusting me to tell Jaycee's story. The first question I have and I always ask is, aside from the brain tumor and all that, who is Jaycee? I want you to talk about her, like she liked, her favorite color. I want people to know who is Jaycee.
She is a little dewdrop of sunshine. Loved babies, dolls, trolls, color pinks, purples, yellows. She was a ray of sunshine. Pleasure to be around. Always wanted to be there to help and work in the kitchen, and yeah.
A bright ball of sunshine. Like that's, yes. When I see her pictures, that's what I see too. You can tell she had that energy and that brightness to her.
She loved to entertain
on her own terms.
Absolutely.
On her own terms, and that's what. So she lived up to having. She had two middle names, but she lived up to having Sunshine be her middle name. Is that was what she brought to a room. That's what she brought anywhere she went. It was smiles. It was from day one until the last day. She was smiles, and her care and her concern was always about everybody else, never about herself.
That's beautiful. Sweet, but also has a little bit of fire, like the sun, like that sunshine part of it.
Definitely was a hurricane of emotions.
She sounds amazing. I just want to hand it over and you guys can tell her story. Something that I'm asked a lot is, what were the initial symptoms that you saw in Jaycee that led up to that diagnosis?
It was a couple weeks into November, and just one random night she threw up, and we're like, okay, well, she's typical sick kid kind of thing. She'll get over it. And she bounced back. She just got sick one time. Then, oh gosh, a couple weeks into December, she got sick again, and we thought, okay, well, she's picked up another bug at school. She had a little bit more of a difficult time bouncing back from that one. It was maybe 2 or 3 days she would get sick in a row. Then she wouldn't want to eat. She'd be fine the next day. Then it seemed like she picked up another bug. And it was 6 weeks that we were going emergency room, doctors, blood work, all sorts of stuff. And it all related to stomach issues. Doctor's like, oh, she's fine. She picked up another bug, or, oh, it's, she had strep throat, and antibiotics making her sick from that, and this, that, and the next thing.
It was back and forth with doctors for weeks and weeks and weeks on end of us being told that she's got some kind of gastrointestinal issue. She's constipated. It's one of those things where we tell people that she was on so many laxatives that she shouldn't have been able to walk, and it wasn't doing anything. It was helping absolutely nothing. And nothing was getting better.
And she was going to the bathroom, but it was still not helping the stomach pain.
No, and Trish was beginning to feel like she was basically being put on a list, like being put in a room and watched, like you're making your child sick because you're bringing them in so much. We're telling you the same thing. We're telling you what's wrong, and you're not listening to us. You're not agreeing with us. And it was, I guess,
nobody believed.
Nobody believed. I even had a hard time believing it because, as a kid, it's like if for me, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, you get sick, you rub some dirt on it and walk it off, and I do remember getting upset, getting angry, like this is getting ridiculous. We know that I felt like there was nothing wrong, like it was just because the way that this tumor would affect is that you would feel bad one time of the day, and then a majority of the day you'd feel just fine. So it really looked weird. It looked bad, and so I feel guilty still for that. But it was an eventual. Our daughters were looking her right in the eye, and then I saw it, looked her right in the eye, and her eye just turned in all the way, just one.
It was ever so slightly. I didn't even pick up on it.
I caught it when she looked at you, and then she'd look away, and it was almost like her eye and her brain would reset. Okay. And then it would, if you look at her directly and have her look straight at you, it would happen again. And so my sister happens to work, for an eye doctor, and we were able to get her in for an appointment pretty fast. And that appointment turned into actually being on our oldest daughter's birthday, I was out picking up dinner, and I get a text message saying, our pediatrician has called, you guys need to get to Milwaukee now. We're going to let them know you're on your way, you're going to get there, check in, and we're going to do further tests, more than we can do here.
How long since you started seeing the initial symptoms to when they actually started listening was that? Because I feel like...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, it's a common thing where, as parents, we're kind of questioned like, you're crazy, or kind of made to feel like we don't know what we're talking about when we spend a lot of the time with our kids. And it's common to see, even in Luna's story, that it takes doctors so long. And that's lost time, especially with a diagnosis like for children. It's kind of like time lost.
No, everybody, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, they all thought I was mental. Like it was flu symptoms, and then it would go away for a day or two. But it was, 6-7 weeks maybe total.
Yeah, it was a few. It was essentially a few months of lost opportunity for them to figure out what was wrong.
And I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so my focus was solely on her. And every day I was calling the doctor, going to an ER. I mean, I would go to multiple different locations trying to explain my situation. They all thought I was nuts.
No, that's exactly what it was.
Did you at any point begin to think yourself that you were?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I accepted the fact that this is just how my life is going to be for the rest of my life. She's going to be sick one day and healthy the next day, and eventually something will work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was...
I was going nuts.
No, that was the hardest thing, and to go back and look at it now, or you go back and I guess to one extent we look at it and we say, okay, doctors aren't coming in thinking that every child or every patient has the worst case scenario outcome. They're looking for the easiest fix, the unfortunate treat them and street them attitude that we want to get them in and out, and they're not looking for what could possibly be wrong. And when you go back and look, as soon as we got the actual diagnosis and the name, we were Googling, we were all over it, and matching up the symptoms to every single thing she had, saying, why didn't anybody catch this? And how long did it go on, or how much damage was done in all that time that you wasted before you found out what was truly wrong? And would it have made a difference? And of course, we never know. We're not ever going to know if it would have made a difference. But that's one thing that, we should be able to control. We should be able to, to have people listen to what we're saying. And all too often, unfortunately, in our world, in our community, we don't get listened to. We look like, you're out of your mind, or you're just take what we're telling you because we're doctors, and take it at face value. You shouldn't be questioning us.
The day that I noticed her eye turn in, I called the pediatrician because it was a new symptom. And that afternoon, she got an appointment. She looked at it. She called in, and she could see it. She called in her colleague. Colleague said, well, yeah, I see it. It doesn't look terrible. We'll set you up for a CAT scan, but we need to make it seem like it's a worst case scenario for the insurance to push it through, because the insurance will see her just as a normal kid. They're not going to see a reason for it. And that's the first time that I thought, okay, well, maybe there is an issue, like more than just like, oh, it's a lazy eye. Like nobody listens. Nobody listens. Nobody cares.
We don't only get pushback from the doctors, but then, the insurance has to make that decision if it's worth the time to do.
And like that night when we were at the Children's Hospital, her pediatrician called my cell phone, and she said, I am so sorry. She didn't.
I think that
she felt guilty.
Out of all of the doctors, the doctors that we met or had contact with, our pediatrician and our secondary oncologist at the hospital where she had most of her treatments were the only two that gave a damn. And I believe that our pediatrician was, she was, like she said, she apologized. She felt bad that she didn't catch it.
Nobody thinks about it, though.
They don't. They're not looking for the worst case scenario.
They see a kid. They don't want him to be sick. They see him as, flu symptoms. It's easy. It's a flu. It's not always like that.
Once we were in Children's, we were checked in immediately. They knew we were coming, but we were in the waiting room for hours before.
Oh gosh, that drove me nuts. It had to have been 6 hours.
We were there for a long time before we were physically taken into a room. And once we were put into a room, she was essentially given the CT, I mean, almost right away and within minutes. I mean, it wasn't even long enough for a radiologist to read the scans. It was the on-call ER doc came in and said, she came in and sat down, and as soon as she came in, you know, Trish looks at her and she goes, "It's a tumor, isn't it?" And up until for a few days, they called it a mass. They would not call it a tumor. They said, "She has a mass. We need to admit her right now." And so she breaks down. I'm in complete shock and have like zero emotion.
Meanwhile, Jace is sleeping in the background.
Because she's exhausted. I mean, it's been...
It's a lot.
In the morning.
6 hours, you know, it's a lot for a child to be in like in an emergency room.
It was a lot, and I tell the story often that I signed the original release for her to have the drain put into her brain on a tissue box, because it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's what the doctor came in and he was looking for something for me to sign it on. And at that point, that was when I finally broke down and realized what was going on. And I mean, neither one of us slept for like 2 days.
It was very serious. They immediately brought her to the ICU.
Right. And it was also our first encounter with child life, the most amazing people on the planet that we love and adore. But I just remembered that they coming in at that early in the morning, trying to explain to Jaycee kind of what's going to happen and what's going to go on. And she just was such an incredible, strong kid that we just don't give these kids, I say this enough, we don't give them enough credit for how incredibly strong they are. And what they go through and how much they don't break down while we're in puddles in the corner trying to figure out what to do. And it was just incredibly scary. And then it was later on the next day before we finally actually had that drain put in, because it was to get all the scheduling together. And then we met with the surgeon that first day, and again it was like, so they're telling us it's a mass, and he said, "I know what it is." He goes, "I know what it is just by looking at it, but I can't confirm it until pathology, you know, looks at it, but I know what it is." And that at that point it's a tumor. We have no idea. We didn't know it was cancer. We didn't know anything.
We didn't have a name to put to it. Just
we had nothing. We had nothing. And we go back and you look at all the forms. You know, they checked for, you know, all the big ones, the ATRT, DMG, DIPG. They checked for everything, and it was all negative. She was negative for Leaf-Fermini and for the gene mutation that should have caused this type of tumor. It was just an absolute crapshoot that it happened, and it was. There's no rhyme or reason that it did, and they can't explain it. And that's where we were. And then they put that in, that drain, and then her sisters came to visit her the next day, I remember, and she came and they walked in the room and she goes, "Look, I had surgery." And she just this tube coming out.
Like it was just
like it was no big deal. And I mean, I have this picture that we took of her on that day when they're sitting on the bed with her, and she's just, if you zoom in, she's just giving me the side eye because I'm focusing the camera on her. And you know, she was crabby when she first her interactions with being put to sleep for all these procedures. In the very beginning, she woke up mad at the world.
Oh, the propofol.
She hated life, didn't want anything to do with anybody, and then it slowly kind of turned into. It got a little bit more calm, but in the beginning, if once she woke up from that, you needed to give her space, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was not something that we wanted to witness. And when they finally decided, you know, we're gonna go, now we know what it is, or at least where it's at, we're gonna go in and we're gonna do this surgery to remove it. And that first surgery was 10 hours long. We were in the waiting. We shut the waiting room down. They turned the lights off. There was no one in there but us.
I forgot we were there.
Well, I mean, we were out in the back corner, just minding our own business, and like I said, I remember finally the surgeon coming in, and I remember like the visions of things that you have in your brain, or is that his hands and like. Were like different colors because he had the gloves on for so long that like there was no circulation there, and that I remember in my brain. But he came in, he let us know that, you know, she did well, everything went well. They think they got everything. I mean, they were really good throughout the surgeries. That they would call like every hour or so or text, and they'd let you know she's doing okay. This is where we are. They originally, I think, planned it for like 6 hours, and it went on to 10.
Wow, 10.
And multiple blood transfusions.
Right. I mean, it was was scary. I mean, it was, I don't even know how else to put it or what words to put there, but it was absolutely.
And the surgeon explained to us, worst case scenario, well, best case scenario would be that she'd have left-sided weakness and all sorts of a laundry list of symptoms when she came out of surgery, and she had none of them.
No.
2 popsicles in her hand, sitting up, happy as a clam. So.
Yeah, it was incredible for her to come out of it like that. And we didn't know what we were walking into. When we came back, when she was rolled into the ICU, we had no idea what we were going to see when we came through the room. But, she, aside from the normal wires, I mean, she had a catheter and that was it. We expected it was just going to be horrible, and she's just sitting up with her popsicles like it was no big deal. And, then you wait till the next day and they do an MRI and the doctor pulls us in and we're thinking, oh my God, what now? He says, we see a little tiny spot, and I don't know if it's
millimeters.
We don't know if it's scar tissue or if it's, leftover tumor, but we want to go back in and make sure that we get it all. And we said, okay. So they were going to go, they went back in.
Oh, she was pissed.
Yeah, it was.
She had to have another surgery. She was mad.
Yeah. So they did that.
She was very vocal of it through her.
She was not happy. She didn't want to be there, and of course, we understood that. And it was coming up on her birthday, and she just wanted to be home. And so we, so of course we get that ready, and then she's wheeled in. The next 2 days later, she's wheeled into the hospital next door where they do the second surgery, and that one wasn't as long.
It was only about 4 or 5 hours, I think.
Yeah, and it was. They got everything out. They said it's 100% total resection. There's nothing left behind. Everything looks good. The nurse that actually was there was a really cool guy, and he braided her hair so amazingly. It was they cut so little hair for what they did with the surgery. It was incredible, and it was just the group of doctors that were there because the old doctor said, well, they did a great job because I would have just shaved her whole head, and which is what we expected. We thought that's what was going to happen. We come in and you couldn't even see where anything was because the way that they cut it, you couldn't tell. And it was so they did that much to just preserve that amount, I guess, of dignity for her, and because she was just she's just a little girl, and to lose your hair, to lose that identity, they did what they could, and they braided it. It was beautiful. It came around the side and everything. And it was like, so then when she had the next surgery, when we went in to get like a shunt put in and things like that, we requested the same doctors. We're like, you're going to braid her hair again, right? You're going to make sure that it looks nice. And we had an anesthesiologist that we loved. The way that he treated her with respect and made her feel comfortable. He came in for the first one and said, I'm going to be here in the morning unless I don't get enough sleep tonight. And we said, you go home right now and you get sleep because we want you here.
You need to be.
And he did. He did. He was there the next day, and he was there for her, and he was, and it was.
Well, I think seeing the familiar faces in a scary situation for the child makes it a little bit more comforting too.
And it's important overall, I think, to have medical staff that has that type of bedside manner that truly shows that care for these children, understanding that it's not an adult, it's a child, and it's a big thing to have to be put to sleep, to have this surgery, to be opened up. It's good to see, and I think all doctors and surgeons should be doing that.
Yeah, especially when they've got such long, beautiful hair like Luna and Jaycee and stuff.
Yeah,
you don't want to just shave it off, but I mean, you do if that's going to make
she
it
had beautiful
better.
hair. She had beautiful, again, like the sunshine, with that fire hair.
And we don't know where the red came from.
Oh no! It's just.
No. It's
total crapshoot.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you look at her family and mine, like there's hints of red here and there in like the men's hair, but nothing like her. She came out, it was just that beautiful flowing red hair, and it was just kind of her thing, and it
matched
made no
her
sense.
energy.
Yeah, it was incredible, and it's, and that's I think one of the biggest things. I mean, that was her hair was the one thing I think that really hit me a lot harder than it hit her. When she came out of the shower, once she came out and she handed me this clump of hair.
After radiation.
After radiation, when it first started falling out, and she brought it out and she handed it to me. She goes, "Here, And again, it was no big deal to her.
Well, she hated brushing it.
But for me,
she was okay with
like
it coming
that was
out.
when it really felt real. Like here we are, we're finally seeing the first signs of a sick child. The first signs of her going through treatment was that hair to finally fall out, and it wasn't even until almost the end of radiation before any of it fell out. And when with chemo, it came out a lot faster. But I shaved my head when she started losing her hair, but she would not let us touch her hair. She had about 7 hairs that would not let go, and she would not let us take them out. That was hers. That was what she could control, and she didn't care. She owned it. That was her attitude towards everything. When they said, you'll probably lose your hearing. She lost partial hearing in one ear, and when she didn't want to listen to what we were saying, she rolled over and she put that ear up. And she would just ignore us.
She's like, that way that I can't. Then
Right. That's
I won't be able
exactly
to
what she
listen.
did. And she said, and then they told her, you probably will never have kids. And she said, okay, that's fine. I'll just adopt. And that was the way that she approached life. And she didn't she didn't want that stuff to bother her. And it tore us apart, but it wasn't something that really bothered her. And I think that's so apparent in all these kids that they don't let that kind of stuff bother them.
Yeah.
They just want to be kids. They don't want to be bothered with all of that, and that's what they can control, and that's how they control it. But with once we got done with that second surgery, we walked back from that hospital and we were talking to the surgeon, and we kind of said, what's your plans? We said, well, she turns, her birthday comes up on February 14th on Valentine's Day. We want to try to be home for that. And he said, it's possible, but not likely. And we said, okay, well, we're gonna go with it because we want to make sure she's safe before we send her home. And she she hated PT. She hated that with a passion. And we told her, if you don't do it, we can't go home. And that was throughout her entire treatment. She hated it, but we finally got her to kind of, give in to that and go through it. And then she was doing really well. And then the school teachers would come in and kind of help her with that. And they said, okay, you just have to prove to us that you're strong enough to go home and that everything is looking right. And we said, okay. And on the 12th of February in 20, she got up and they released us, and she walked herself out of the hospital. No wheelchair, no nothing. She walked herself out of the hospital. We did not tell our other 2 daughters that we were coming home, and we got in the car and drove all the way home from Milwaukee, and we went to the school to surprise them. And it was, that was a level of support that we had from everybody then was amazing. And it was something that we wish we still had a lot of. Unfortunately, a lot of that support falls off, but it was just to watch, go from in 12 days for us to be in the hospital, 3 surgeries, and more MRIs and CTs and whatever else that I could count, and for her to just get up and walk out of that hospital was just an amazing thing. And we thought at that point, because of the way that she was reacting to everything she had gone through, that we were going to be that family that she beat it, because she wasn't having any side effects from the surgeries that they thought she was going to have. She wasn't having any side effects from anything. It was just like I was on vacation for 2 weeks. What we've kind of noticed, or what we've kind of taken from meeting a lot of the families in social media, is that we may be a little bit different in the fact that her treatment, physical treatment like radiation and chemo, did not start right away. It was a month later before any of that started. But it was like we waited almost a month before we got a treatment plan, and then things got started. It was not like okay, you've got it, we're starting it now, which may or may not be the kind of the status quo of how things go. But from what I've kind of gathered along meeting all these families, is that it's not really the status quo, that maybe something should have started right away, or at least they should have understood. And I think a lot of it was because this was a type of tumor that our oncologist that we were assigned had no idea what it was.
And what was her exact diagnosis?
It was called choroid plexus carcinoma.
Okay.
So when we researched it after we got the diagnosis, we found out that about 30 kids a year in the U.S. are diagnosed with it. It has a really bad outcome. but there's also no general protocol or understanding for it. So there are protocols for certain type, like leukemia, and not all leukemias have the same protocol, but it's got an understanding. Or we understand some of the bigger names, like everybody's heard of, when I speak to people, you've heard of DIPG or ATRT, like you've heard of them.
Yes.
You may not know how to treat it exactly, but you've heard of them. When I bring up Jaycee's tumor, most people will say we've never heard of it, or we have, but there's no real research to really understand how to treat it.
Yes.
So they went through a treatment plan that was talked about from Milwaukee, I believe, Seattle, and then also Sick Kids in Canada. That's how they kind of collaborated and said, this is the treatment we're going to put her on. And we said, we didn't know any better. We said, okay, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Of course, later on, and you look back, you say, we probably should have done this and not this, but unfortunately we can't turn back time, and we don't know if those ideas would have made a difference.
And you're pretty much, you're thrown into a world you don't know, and you have to become professional in it and know based on your own research that you do online. Because even I feel like when these doctors give you that diagnosis, they just give you a kind of very, very small, like, oh, this is what it is. And us as a parents, we have to go and do further research. But I can imagine how hard it was with something that much more rare, not heard of, that doctors don't even know.
Right. And like we didn't know any better. So thrown in that scenario, we're thinking, okay, the doctors have our best interest at heart. We're gonna trust them. We're gonna stick with them. And, we didn't know that we should be doing our own research, behind the scenes, getting second opinions, third opinions, fourth opinions. We didn't know.
And then, unfortunately, when we finally did get second opinions, it was too far along, and our only option at one point was to go to New York, but then it would have been a clinical trial, and she would have had to, of course, qualify, and we didn't think that she was even physically safe enough to travel. So, and a lot of people, it was the same thing. We would have done the same thing, or, this is the same type of protocol that we would have followed, and it's not necessarily that it was done wrong. And, we look at it, searches, you can come up with so many answers, and I think even now, years later, we've been able to find more and more answers and more people that have come along that have had their children diagnosed, that had different types of treatments that have worked, or at least prolonged things, or didn't have as bad of side effects. And, and that's going to happen every single year. We're going to see more and more. But, at that time, at that time, we knew nobody. We had nobody in the world that we were thrown into that we could lean on, that we could ask questions, that we could really bounce ideas off of. And you're just you're all alone on an island, trying to figure out how to keep your head above water. At the same time, you've got work and you've got other children, you've got responsibilities, and you're trying to balance it all. And so unfortunately, I think a lot of the time, we as parents, we just say yes, or we sign the form thinking they've got our best interest at heart. They're going to do the best thing they can because that's what they do. Yeah. And I don't think it's always the case. And I think, later on down the road, as you start to kind of learn, and you ask questions, and then they kind of look at you like, well, sorry, that's not going to work now because of this decision we made here. That's not going to work. And you're thinking, but then why were we never given this option? Why were we never given a chance to really explore, like, either A, B, or C? Which one do you want to do? It was, here's your option. We're going to start it on this day.
All right, and like towards the very end, was when we realized that the chemo drugs that she was on didn't even touch the blood-brain barrier, which is where they needed to go.
I was going to ask about that because usually brain tumors, chemo, there's I think a few that they say that do, but it's very little. Don't usually pass that blood-brain barrier.
Yes, the high-dose ones that she was on for her stem cell, those ones did. But it didn't really do anything for her.
No, and I didn't even know the blood-brain barrier was a thing until we got, I think, to the end of her chemo, or we got to the point where they were going to do stem cells, and they said all of that the drugs that she was on, they focused from here down. It's like, but the tumor's up here. Why are we focusing on putting her body through all of this and not really focusing on the area? And that never made sense to me. And then, of course, to be put into the stem cells, we were put in there way before we were supposed to. And it didn't work. I mean, she definitely got it, bounced back faster than they thought she would, but it ultimately didn't do anything. And honestly, I think what it did was it kind of opened the floodgates, or it reignited the cancer cells that were in her, because up until that point, every single scan and every single testing of her spinal fluid showed no cancer cells, every single one. And then as soon as this was over, and they did a test of her spinal fluid in the hospital after she had a seizure, they noted cancer cells in the spinal fluid. I was extreme, and this was the first time I think that I actually got angry with the one oncologist that had come in, or he was a neurosurgeon, and then another doctor that was on the pediatric ICU. And this was the first time when he's like, well, we've got to give it time. I said, you've had plenty of time. We should be seeing some type of results. And she had this seizure. She went from talking to me to within 5 minutes being completely catatonic, and then a week of no responsiveness. And then he came in and said, okay, well, she's got, the shunt is bad. And they replaced the shunt. Then they put in a second shunt, and then they drained the fluid, and kept telling me, well, you'll see a result. And she was not turning around. And the guy was just getting angry with me. And I said, he's like, we just have to wait. And I said, what are we waiting for? Like, you've done nothing. You said you've done all you can do, but you've done nothing. And that was the last time that I saw him. And then there was another doctor that fought me on the fact that she should have an MRI at that point to see if anything was happening. He said, we're going to do it tomorrow. I said, no, you're going to do it right now. Why are we sitting here just waiting for something to happen? And
because they considered her a lost cause.
Well, exactly. But I never saw that doctor again. And he walked by one time and looked at me and gave me an eye. And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, if you can't handle parents that are going through the worst time in their life and have emotions that are higher than ever, telling you exactly what they want to take care of their kids, then you're in the wrong profession. You chose the wrong floor to work on. And so those two doctors I never saw again, and there was one nurse during the stem cell transplants that I told was not allowed to come in our room ever again, because he came in with an attitude. And he said, these kids are scared. These kids they're away from their families. We were in stem cells and then that seizure for 51 days. We were away from everybody. They're frightened. They're alone. They don't know what's going on. They're with one parent. They're missing their siblings, and you can't come in and act like that. You're not allowed to be in our room anymore. And that was the end of it. And the other nurses were like, we're so sorry. We can't imagine. We don't know why that happened. And that was fine. But it's, we're trying the best we can as parents to try to understand what's going on and what's the best course of action. And then at that point, we're realizing we either made mistakes, or the doctors made mistakes, or we didn't do enough research, or we're feeling that guilt and we can't shake it no matter what. And then we're dealing with people that just look at us like a number and like a patient as opposed to a person.
Well, I'm sure you dealt with it too, to a certain degree.
Yeah. And I think I was just going to say, I think it's important for people or parents and caregivers to know that it's okay to tell, I don't want this person treating my child. I don't want this, whoever it is, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a specialist, whether it's a nurse. I dealt with that a lot. And I also had to, at first I was very like, just let it go. But when you're spend so much time in the hospital, you shouldn't have to deal with that additional attitude, with that additional looks. Right. It makes it uncomfortable, and you're in a place where you're so vulnerable and your focus is on your child. You shouldn't have added anything from anybody.
Yeah, emotions are high, stress is high. The last thing you need is somebody to push you over the edge with a bad attitude.
When we got done with the stem cells, we came home for 2 days, and then we went back to the hospital, and then that's when she had this focal seizure that made no sense. And then we were there for that other 11 days. But at the end of the 11 days, she was starting to finally come around a little bit. She was starting to communicate more. And we had one nurse that was on the floor that was just incredible. And it was someone that I reached out to when we were done. I reached out to when Jay's passed. I stayed in contact because she was so in tune with Jace when we were there, and it made her feel so comfortable that she fought for us to go home. Because I said, listen, I think that she's going to do better at home with her family, being able to recover at home versus sitting here waiting for, I don't know, her to get up and jump around. Like, and she agreed, and she fought for that. And so we finally got to go home, and it was definitely a positive for her to be home, even sitting on the couch or laying on the couch. She started to open up and kind of come around more because she was in her surroundings and she was comfortable. And, you know, and then we were able to kind of move forward with other things with our church and her going through that. And it just felt good. It felt good to have her home and going through everything as a family versus just kind of being isolated. Yeah. And I mean, I honestly thought, you know, maybe this is on the up and up. Maybe we're going to finally turn it around. Even with the diagnosis again of having those cells in her spinal fluid, but then that was me starting to then freak out and say, well, why don't we treat her this way? And well, we can't because of a decision that was made earlier on in treatment. And so that option's off the table. And as stem cells are usually the last ditch effort, that's the last step, which I've always kind of questioned, or we've questioned too. Why not do it first? Because it's supposed to delete your system essentially and start you over. So why don't you just start there? But I don't know what the reasoning is. I'm not a doctor, but that part I will never understand. But that's kind of like this is the last chance we have. And, you know, we did it, and it didn't work the way that it should have worked. And so that was us then scrambling, trying to find answers from New York and Boston Children's, and I think the Mayo Clinic and Seattle. I mean, I had her tissue sample sent off, and we were doing we had to pay. I remember we paid a decent amount of money.
We paid about $1,200 for Boston to look over all of her charts.
Just to look at them.
Yeah, just to look at everything, and it was. It took weeks for all the records to be sent, that's another issue. I don't know why things aren't all digitized, but it took forever for things to get sent, and then they finally got it, and it was kind of like, well, here's where we are, based on where she is in her current treatment and everything, and based on how she's doing in her counts, there's really nothing more we can do here. But, you know, had you come earlier, maybe. And unfortunately, that wasn't an option anymore. But we were nothing if not trying to do everything we could at the last minute when we knew that our options here were done. And so we just made, at that point, I think we weren't giving up, but we definitely were looking and coming to the realization of what was going to happen. And she had really good days even between then and the day she passed, and she had bad days. And good days where she would, you know, get up and walk and be okay. And then there were days when she felt like complete crap and didn't want to do anything. And we did the best we could to comfort her in every way that we possibly could and kind of cater to her. And her sisters were really good at taking her mind off of everything. And she craved being around them. That was her safe place, was to be around them, especially Miley. For whatever reason, they had a bond that she would call her on the phone in the hospital even when she was at school. And she said, I can't talk, Jason. And Jaycee would give me the phone back, and she'd just have a sad face. And I'm like, I'm sorry. When she's done, she'll call you. And then she would FaceTime her and literally just put the phone down and sit there. Like she just wanted her to be there. And she hated being apart from them. And truthfully, I think she got a little sick of Dad being with her, the only person in the hospital. And you know, we had fun together, but I think it gets to the point where she's like, you know, I want to be around everybody else. And, and she tried, and she never gave up on things, and
never really asked why her either.
No.
It was never a pity party. She always worried about us, and you know, said that she was sorry that she was a burden, basically.
Yeah, she apologized all the time, and it was, you know, I remember when they first put the NG in, and the first time that she got sick, and we did everything we could, but those things are not really like they're meant to. I mean, they come out easy, really.
Yeah.
And it came out the one time, and the nurses came in, and she was just apologizing the entire time, like, I'm so sorry, I feel like it's all my fault. And you know, again, it's like this this diagnosis in itself, it has a very high tendency to rip families apart. And these kids feel responsible, when in reality, they're not responsible. You're doing everything you can for them. You're changing your life and you're changing your lifestyle to cater to making sure that they're okay. But it's like you can't get them to realize that nothing that is going on, whether it's, you know, you're fighting or anything like that, is their fault. It's just kind of it comes with the territory, I guess. But she was always apologetic. And then when they finally, you know, they put in the shunt, and they actually put it in one second shunt on her birthday. We had to go to Milwaukee, stay overnight. We were supposed to stay overnight and come home the next day. We ended up staying an extra day because after she came out of surgery, she was just she couldn't stand up. Her balance sucked, and she just didn't look good. I wanted to come home. I fought for it. I think it was more so because I was just tired of being in the hospital. And I think that was more of it. But we stayed the extra day, and then we came home, and it just never, she developed where she couldn't really swallow very well, and she couldn't speak very well, and it was almost like she was always trying to cough something up, and we could never get anything. So we were able finally to get like a machine to suck it out, but it never got any better. It almost seemed to get worse and worse and worse, and finally we admitted her to the hospital again for them to look at it. They thought they had it figured out, put her on, I believe, steroids and something else that they could kind of help it make it feel better. And then I remember all the doctors coming in and telling me, okay, this is where it's at, this is where we are, but we can't do anything more. She needs to go to Milwaukee. So we're going to life flight her to Milwaukee, and you can't go, you've got to drive. I'm like, because they brought about 12 people on the helicopter. And I said, okay. So I walked with her all the way to the helipad on top of the hospital. And at that point, she was just not very with us at that. She was very kind of out of it a little bit. And I thought she was going to be scared. She just really went with it. And then I raced back home. I picked her up, and we raced to Milwaukee, and just in time for them not to have gotten all the information they should have gotten to understand why she was even life flighted there. And we had oncologists come in not understanding why she was there. We had nurses coming in to take blood from her, and I said, or they were going to put in an IV. I said, and I'm on the phone with the doctor, and I'm motioning. I said, she has a port. But we're not putting IVs in her, and the nurse didn't even know this, and it was frustrating. And then the next day it was, okay, we're going to pull you into a room, and they almost put you in there and then kind of box you in. And he pulls up the computer screen, and he's showing us pictures of her brain and of everything else, and saying, okay, here's where we are. We're thinking, okay, we're going to talk about clinical trials or, you know, whatever we're going to do. And he pulls us in. He said, there's nothing more we can do. You know, if you want to, you know, we'll transport her home for you, you know, and we'll set up hospice, but there's nothing more we can do. And she leaves immediately. And I was very, very angry at that point. I really wanted to pick this oncologist up and throw him through the wall, because I felt like, why bring us all the way out here 2 hours away from our home to tell us this, that you can't do anything. And then we went back to the room, and on the way out of the room, I said, get the paperwork. We're signing her out right now, and we're taking her home. And they tried like hell for probably an hour, if not more, to make us stay and get an ambulance to take us home. They said, she's going to code on the way home. You don't do this. And I said, no. I said, this is not the last thing she's going to see is going to be this hospital, and we're taking her home now. So we signed her out AMA, and we took her home. And by the time we got there,
we had to sign a DNR too.
We did have to sign a DNR to take her out. And the whole time, again, at that point, her mental state was not where it should be, and she kept asking for things, and it was like she was living in a loop. She would say, can I have a bath? The bath was like her comfort. And we'd say, honey, there's no bath here. We can't do that. And then she'd be like, okay. And then 2 seconds later, she'd go, can I have a bath? And it was just a loop that she was like stuck in. And it was breaking our heart, but we said, we're taking her home now. And we wheeled her out and we put her in the car and we drove home. And at that point, hospice was there. And hospice is another thing that I think gets a bad rap because of what you kind of associate it with.
Yeah.
But the people that we met within hospice, I think, were the most caring people, and they understand what you're going through. They make it so seamless and easy. And, you know, we got home and we had all that kind of stuff set up and more medical equipment in the house that I wish we never would have had to have here. We had 12 days with her, and it was hard. Say something.
Okay.
Hospice is great. It was always my biggest fear when you get the diagnosis that, you know, nobody ever wants to hear the H word, nobody ever wants to hear the cancer word. But yeah, once we got the hospice team, we never had to deal with another doctor or prescription. Anything that we needed, they had for us immediately. The night that we thought the night that she was passing, we called her nurse and she came and she cried with us. And, you know, that morning they took her away.
The way that I've described her and the way these kids are, that night that she passed, she woke up once and had she couldn't catch her breath and she was having a hard time. And we put the oxygen on her. We finally calmed her down for a little while. And then she woke up and it started again. And I looked at her and I said, go get the girls because I think this is it.
Yeah.
And I looked at Jayce and I asked, I said, are you okay? And she just shook her head. And within minutes after that, she went into that sleep that she didn't wake up from. And it was just like a deep sleep, and her breathing was weird. And then we moved her into her bed, and, you know, the girls were able to come in and, you know, say their goodbyes to her, but they didn't want to be there when she passed. But they were there as long as they could. And then we just took turns just holding her and being there with her. And her breathing would stop almost for like a minute. And then all of a sudden she would take a big gasp. And, you know, at that point, it was one of those things where we kind of chuckled a little bit, like, you're just messing with us now, you know, and she did that a couple times. And then she kept telling her, you know, which is, you know, just keep chasing the rainbows. And then I put my head on her chest and I could hear the heartbeat stop. I could feel it stop. And the nurse came over and checked and said, she's gone. And then I had to go into the girls' rooms and tell them that she had passed. And, you know, we just laid there with her forever, just hugging her and being with her, and that we changed her. And we called, we didn't have a funeral home. They came in and they asked, you know, where do you want her to go? We weren't planning on this happening. You know, we had a party for her with all of her friends planned for the next day that everybody was supposed to come and be. It was part of the psychiatrist or whatever said this would be a good idea to get her spirits up. And so we weren't planning on this. And I'm searching for funeral homes near us, and there was one that was familiar because I knew the name, and I said, I guess this is where she goes. And, you know, they came, and within a little while, I mean, and they were there, and they said, we're going to bring the stretcher. And I said, no. I said, I'll carry her out. And I carried her out there and, you know, put her on there. And I just sat outside, and I just looked at her, and I remember saying that it's everybody on this street, everybody's still sleeping in their beds or they're drinking their coffee and they have no idea what just happened. No idea what their neighbors are going through, no idea that a child has just passed. And they're going to go about their days, and it's not going to make a difference. And then it was just, I think for us, the emotions, I had family in town, and I think we just became catatonic for the day, where it wasn't a whole lot of emotion that was shown, because I think we were just cried out at that point. With our friends that we met through the hospital who lost their daughter last year, they were the first ones at our house, and they stayed with us until like 10 o'clock at night. And they were there for everybody and anything that, they were kind of on guard helping, and we didn't want people in her bedroom, and so it was a day that, you can't, like, 4:15 in the morning, that her heart stopped, and she hung on for so long. It was like that her soul had, like, she was gone, but her body just wouldn't give up. And her heart wouldn't give up, for that matter, but her body gave up way before she did. And then to sit down and try to plan, and when you go to the funeral home and they're asking you all these questions, and like, I don't know how do you plan a funeral for a child?
It's like it should be the other way around. It should never be the parent doing this for this child. And I think a lot of people think your child passes and it's over. No, there's still all these decisions that you still need to make for your child that people don't really talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and they called that morning before we came in for our appointment, and they said, "Do you want to see her while you're here?" And initially we both looked at each other and said, "No, we don't want to remember her like that." And we got in there, and we were doing, going through all the decisions and picking everything out and stuff. And then we said, we need to see her. She's here. We need to see her. And that was, I didn't want to leave at that point. I didn't want to leave her there.
Leave her child.
But at that point, we were, with her, and we were holding her hand, and we were with stuff like that. And we had realized one of the things that may seem insignificant to people, but we said, when she passes, the port needs needs to be taken out.
She is to have no wires, no tubes, nothing.
And it was gone. They had taken it out. We said, we don't want her to go with that in there. That's part that she doesn't need to have with her. Mm-hmm. So that was removed. And then, when everything is done, they said, "Do you want us to call you on the day when her cremation is?" And we said, "Yes." And it's one of those, just that phone call. We knew it was coming. We knew what we were doing. We know what we had decided. But they called and they said, "We just want to let you know that today she'll be cremated." And we didn't see her again until her services. And surprisingly, the services weren't as emotionally, I guess, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. We were obviously upset and we were sad, but it was, we did the same thing I think you did. It was like that. It's celebrate their life, not
not mourn a loss, but celebrate what was there.
Right. Mm-hmm. We even had a friend of ours, and
I wore yellow.
Well, we said wear bright colors. We don't want black. We don't want any of that. We want bright colors. Come in. We had, her bracelets for everybody to take and everything like that. And we said, we had one friend that he was the first one to visit us in the hospital when she was first diagnosed, and he had brought her this giant sloth. A hot pink sloth, and it was one of those things that we always laugh about. But he came there and he was so upset, and we said, "Absolutely not. You're not going to cry. You got to hold it in." He's a big giant teddy bear, but he's just one of those guys that he's got that emotional side. We said, "You're not going to be upset, man. You're here to celebrate what she brought to everybody." And so it was a long day, and then the next day was her actual funeral. And again, it was very emotional. It was hard to listen and be there, but it was amazing to see so many people that she had touched to be there.
Yeah.
And then I always say that the one thing that the Father Carl, that he said, because I never saw the sermon, it was one of those things where I'm going to write it. If you want to see it, let us know. And he wrote it, and he said that when Jaycee got to heaven, she looked at God and said, but I only had 8 years. And God said, but look what you did. She was the most incredible kid, and only on loan to us to show us, I think, what this world is missing. These kids were not meant to go through what they went through, but they've given us so much that we can never repay. And through everything that we do, all of our work with the business, work with the nonprofit, work with Congress and all this stuff, it's all just because these kids' stories deserve to be out there. Mm-hmm. These kids deserve to be heard, and the absolute ridiculosity that we have going on in this world right now, and the amount of things that are focused on the one thing that is not is our kids. The one thing that is not is the future that we won't have unless we pay attention. And you know, we are absolutely guilty of growing up or even being parents and turning a blind eye to St. Jude commercials because you don't think it could ever be you. Yeah. You know, we're absolutely guilty of that, and it's unfortunate. And now you look at that stuff thinking it could be anybody at any time, and it doesn't matter where you live, how much money you make, what sex you are, it doesn't matter. Any of this stuff. When it comes to kids, there is so much that is misunderstood and so much that is just out in the ether that there's no way to understand what's going on. And it's a shame because far too many people, I think, believe, well, cancer is cancer, and it's not. And you know, again, we're absolutely guilty of not understanding that until you're thrust into this world. And so I can understand people's kind of not wanting to hear about it, not wanting to be a part of it, because you don't want to talk about sick children. It's not something that's fun to discuss. But at the same time, everybody that has kids, unfortunately, tomorrow could be that day that you become a parent of a cancer child just like we were.
I always say at one point, I was a parent that didn't have a child with cancer. Yeah. That didn't think it could happen to them. And it's not so much that you didn't think it could happen to you, just you don't really think about it. And it's I think that awareness part. And I think now that we're on this side, we want to kind of like nudge people like, hey, it could be your child too. Like cancer doesn't discriminate.
No, it's one of the, like I said, it's one of those, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, I think, mentality that a lot of people have, or just the misunderstanding of what is actually happening on a day-to-day basis in the world. And you know, growing up or going to the hospital, you don't realize that 6 floors up, there's a whole floor of kids that are going through the worst time of their life while you're getting your stitches, or you're getting your broken elbow or something. And these kids are going through all this treatment. And when we're on that floor, that neurology floor, and you're walking around seeing all these families going through the same thing you're going through, and not understanding what tomorrow is going to bring, and if they're going to get out of there, and it's scary, but it's also, I think it angers me a lot that not many people want to just give a damn about what's going on, or feel that they can listen to this entire story and take one piece out of it, and that's what they focus on, when I want you to focus on the whole thing, because there are details, there are pictures, there are images, whether they're physical or in your head, that we may never be able to show people because they're too graphic, and they may upset delicate senses, but it's the reality, unfortunately. It's the reality that people need to see, and that we're not really at liberty to share a lot of, because people get so offended by this stuff. But I mean, like I've said before, I think that we don't get to clock out. We don't get to turn it off. We don't get to just, switch to the next video, or, we live it every single day.
Reality.
So I want people to care. I want people to listen, and I want people to realize that we never thought in a million years that this is where we were going to be in 2024, that on January 30th of 2020 was going to be anything other than our daughter's birthday, that it was going to be the day that our daughter was diagnosed with brain cancer, that in a family that doesn't have a history of anything like that, and that all the factors that would lead to it, she was negative for, and it made absolutely no sense.
People don't understand that. They think that cancer typically happens because something they ate, the environment, and for children, realistically, is bad luck. It's unfortunate, but we could have given our kids the healthiest food, the healthiest environment, the freshest air, and it would have still happened.
Right. And you look at it like, if we have multiple children, why one and not the other? And it's, so it does, none of it makes any sense. And I think that's the big wall that's up between everything, is that a lot, not all, but a lot of adult cancers or symptoms can be linked to lifestyle or linked to whatever. And with kids, it's not. If you've got kidney cancer at 10 years old, you're probably not, or liver cancer, you're probably not drinking all day. Yeah. Or if you have lung cancer, it's probably not because you're smoking. It's, it's bad luck. And, I don't know. It's hard to get people to really kind of get a grip on that part of it. Far too many social media doctors want to tell you that, well, if you would have fed your child this, or if you would have done this, you would have had a better outcome. And it's like, okay, well, but what about the other kids that were doing the exact same thing and it didn't happen?
And not only that, I just spoke to a brain tumor mama yesterday. Her child was 4 months old. At that point, all they have is either breast milk or formula. Right. So how could it be something that you're feeding your child? In adult cancers, it is more, I think it could, but in children, it's hard to understand why. I still even ask myself why, but and it took me a while to get out of that guilt of not feeling that it was something that we did, and people thinking that doesn't help.
No, and it's unfortunate, but it's kind of I guess the world we live in, is that we have to find, some people have to find a reason to be upset, or they have to find a reason to, or they have to find a reason to kind of diagnose you on the outside without the information that they really need to do something like that. And, we get, we deal with it. You take your kids out when they're going through treatments and they lost their hair, and you get the looks like, why would you take your kid out? Or, what are you doing with your, why, and, we got to a point where we thought about taking Polaroids of Jason, giving them to people that were staring at her and saying, you just take it home if you want to stare at it, she's out and she's comfortable, then leave us alone. We're not bothering you. It's that mentality of, you never know what somebody's going through, that is right next to you. And like I said, in the beginning, Jace, she hadn't lost her hair or anything, and you couldn't tell that she was going to radiation every single day. And so there was no way to really understand what was going on until that happened. And you never know these things, but people, unfortunately, they have to find a reason to make us think about something. And we are just forever thrust in this world, no matter what. If you choose to be, if you choose to create organizations, or you work with legislators, or if you choose to do that, or if you choose to kind of just fade in the background, and because you don't want to be associated with it, there's no right or wrong way to grieve or to move forward. But you're always going to be dealing with people that, unfortunately, feel like they know better than you. And I think that we are not given credit for what we understand on the personal level versus what people understand because they learned it out of a book.
Yeah. And I want to touch on that. I want you guys talk about your advocacy and your, what you're doing to carry on Jaycee's legacy.
So we created Battlecorn in 2020 after we came home from the hospital because when she was there, she was getting mail, she was getting packages from her friends in her school. And I think we take for granted we get mail and, you know, whatever, it's just bills. It's nothing fun. But when kids get something with their name on it, they love it, especially if they're young. It's exciting for them. And so we wanted to give back in that same way. And in the very beginning, it was literally us searching Facebook, searching Instagram for families that we could send packages to kind of get our name out there and get started. And it finally grew to what we are now, and we were able to get our nonprofit status, and that became really the core of what our mission was, which is just to create smiles in these kids. And it was something that Jaycee loved to do. Even when she wasn't feeling well, she would say, hey, do we have any packages to send? And she would love to put them together. And our favorite ones were ones that were her age, or, you know, a girl, and she'd be like, put yourself in a box, and she would love it. And that was exciting for her. So when she passed, I said, we're not going to give this up. We're going to keep doing it, and we're going to keep pushing because it's important that we are able to do this for her, because it's what she would have wanted to continue doing. So we're probably getting closer. If we've not passed it by now, we're a little over 800 packages I think that we've sent. And in that same sense, we wanted to add to what we were doing. So the advocacy started after she passed, which was trying to get something going in our state to start with that would bring more funding, because as we all know, the funding for pediatric cancer sucks. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I know we've been to DC the last couple of years, and they've told us that it's doubled. Well, even at doubled, it's only 8%, and that sucks still. And there's no reason for it to be getting the shaft if every single politician puts kids in their platform at some point. Then why are we only giving them the bottom of the barrel? So that started to try to get in touch with as many people as possible and get something passed. And the last couple of years, we've been working on a law that kind of flatlined because it would mean the state wouldn't get as much money. And of course, if they're not putting money in their pocket, then they're not going to help you. So we've shifted over, and we're working on something now that I'll be speaking to a couple doctors on Thursday. That are at the UW, and we're working on something to kind of mirror what they're trying to do in DC, which is to create a brain tissue and rare tissue database at the main University of Wisconsin hospital and college. That would then allow Jaycee.
Is she the first person you've told this to? Besides like you and me?
I haven't put it out there.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Well,
It'll air in May, so perfect.
So that's the plan, and is because basically there are no tissue samples, or at least known tissue samples that I can find, or at least anybody about that has choroid plexus carcinoma samples. And when the rep Ami Bera put out the bill for the data center in DC, that's going to be focused on ATRT. Like they want to get more samples of that, and then they can, kind of build. The reality of it is that there's no place for samples like what Jayce had, and for anybody to study them, because they're just. And I reached out to the Children's Hospital where she had her surgeries. They said yes, her samples are still here, and because her samples are still there,
just collecting dust.
They're not doing anything. So I said, okay, then I know that they're there. So if we're able to get this to push forward, I'm going to make sure that her samples are the first ones in this database. And so I reached out. I met with the doctor a few times. I went and toured his lab in University of Madison, and they're working on neuroblastoma. That's what they kind of focus on. But I was able to see work actually happening, and then I was able to be put in touch with somebody else there that said, I do have a protocol for a database, but we don't have the funding or the staff for it. I said, okay, then let's work together and find out what it's going to cost, what it's going to take, and then I'm going to go to the governor's office because they're working on the budget, and I'm going to say I just want an ask for a budget to put in to build the infrastructure for this database that could then allow other hospitals and organizations or just the college itself to make Wisconsin just the juggernaut of research that would be able to make a massive difference in everything that we're doing. Right. So,
and brain tumor research is so underfunded and under-researched. Is that even?
No, it is. It's underfunded. Yeah. It's like less than 1%. It's like, and what I don't get is we're doing it backwards. You know, brain cancer is the deadliest type of pediatric cancer, but yet the most underfunded. And it's always because, well, we don't have a big enough pool of samples to be able to test or to be able to put into clinical trials and things like that.
We'll get you a pool of samples and just fix it.
And but that's the thing, right? You know, it's like, okay, well, you have one state has got 4 DIP station or patients or something like that, and and it's got 3 ATRT patients, but that's not enough. We need 25 or 30 patients to be able to run a pool, which I understand. You know, the more you have, the more samples you have, the better. But that's not an excuse for not coming up with a solution. So that's where we've kind of shifted. So hopefully, Thursday I'm going to meet with them, and then next week I'm going to meet with the governor's office, and hopefully we can come up with something to create this type of database or this type of research that will. It's only going to be positive for our state, which he's supposed to represent as a whole, and it's kind of one of those things where not to talk down, but I almost want to become the St. Jude of Wisconsin, because all of our research a lot of it comes out of there, which is great, but you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, and I've always said that, and I feel like you're putting them all in one place. All your money goes there, your donations go there, but they can't fix everything. Like they need help in other places, and I think this is a perfect way to be able to do that.
That's amazing, and the fact that Jaycee's tissue would be one of the first, I feel like that's huge. That's huge, and it's a step in the right direction. It's a start. And I think it's a big start.
I'm hopeful of it. It's been a ride. I mean, I never thought that anything when it came to laws or stuff would be easy, and I knew it would be an uphill battle. It's definitely been harder to get support than I really imagined that it would. But all it takes is, I think I have found the right people to help me push it along. And the best part is the ones that I talk to are the ones that have big families, and I don't want to use it as a crutch, but at the same time, if I have to sit down at your desk and turn those photos around and say any one of these kids could be where I'm sitting right now, it makes sense. And at that point, I think maybe you'd care more. And I don't want that to happen. Believe me, I don't want that to happen. We don't want people to understand how we feel. We just want you to listen, but realize at the same time, it's a reality every day that you could wake up and this could happen, and there's no rhyme or reason for it.
And I think you need to show that that's like essentially sometimes what it takes, showing them that perspective, like placing their child in that or their grandchild and realizing, look, like it could be your child too. Like, are you going to listen? Like, would you shy away or would you turn me away if it was your child? Right. Any advice that you would have for parents that are newly diagnosed or that have just stepped and forced into this world? What are some words that you would have to say to them?
Always look for second opinions and third opinions and fourth opinions and so on and so on and so on. Don't go into it blindly like we did.
No, I would say something that we're still learning how to do is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to lean on people. Don't be afraid to let people in. They don't have to be part of this community to be able to be there for you and be a shoulder or be words of wisdom and things like that. It's, for us as a couple, our entire marriage has been helping other people. It's been people either living with us or we're paying people's bills. Like that was always us. And to have this happen, I think we didn't know what to do, how to turn that around. And we're still not big, can you give us help type of people, but just don't be afraid to ask for help and let people in. And knowing, unfortunately, that this community continues to get bigger, there's so many resources and there's so many people that are willing to be there for you that you don't have to do it alone.
I agree 100%. That help part is hard.
But we have our website, battlecorncarepackages.com. We're also on every social media that can be out there, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, everything. We're easy to find, easy to get a hold of. Everything we do is 100% community and donation based.
Tax exempt.
We are 501c3 tax exempt or corporation. So if there's donations you make and you want a letter, I will gladly send one of those. Everything we do is volunteer based. Nobody here takes a salary. None of the money that comes in goes towards anything except the business side of it. So we don't keep any of it. There's no staffing costs or anything like that. We are, with our package bit, the package side of it, and with the donations to research charities, we have done well over $100,000 in, positive things for the pediatric cancer community, and we hope to continue doing that. We host an event every year, our gala coming up in August. That is poised to raise $25,000 and donate that to research and to an organization that rescues those drugs that the FDA will not approve because pharmaceutical companies will not test them in pediatric instances. So that's our investment into the future of pediatric treatment, is to be able to do that. The last 2 years, that event has raised and donated $42,000 to research. And we are extremely proud of that and extremely happy to be able to continue doing that. We do Christmas donations to our hospital as well as adopt families for Christmas as well. So it's something that is growing. Battlecorn has become much more than just a package deliveries to make kids smile. It's become more of an in-depth advocacy as well as trying to help our community and be as much a part of it in a positive way as we can. In Jaycee's honor and in the honor of all of these children that are either fighting or have won their battle and are now our guardian angels. Our hope is that we can just one day go out of business because we're no longer needed. That is the goal, I think, of
100%.
all organizations in this field, is to not be needed anymore. And we hope we can get to that at some point, but we will not stop until there is a law or a building somewhere with Jaycee's name on it, because that was her destiny, to be in lights. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but we're going to do everything to make it happen now.
That's amazing. And honestly, I admire your advocacy and the way you do things and getting the point across and going beyond. You're inspiring, both of you, your story. And I appreciate you guys for coming on here and just trusting me to come on here and share her story and her legacy.
Absolutely. Any chance that we have to be able to share it, we're all over it. The more people that hear it, the better off we will be.
Jaycee, I know, is very proud of both of you for all you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.